Good afternoon, everyone. This is me, Spandan, and I welcome you all to our yet another Leaptalk. And the topic for today is production support and Opsgenie, and we have two presenters for today's session. So our first speaker is Nikita. Nikita Shrestha is working as a software engineer in Leapfrog since about 2.5 years. And apart from all the awesome jobs he does in Team Laudio, she is also interested in cooking and traveling. And our second speaker for today is our Sudeep Man Shrestha, and he's working in Leapfrog as lead project manager. He has been in Leapfrog for about 8 years, and he has been in software industry for about 15 years. And apart from all the project management job, he loves collecting money. So that's really cool, right? So moving on to the topic, we are going to learn about how the production support, alerts, and monitoring works in Audio using Opsgenie. And to present the topic, I would like to call Sudeep Tai. So meanwhile, if we have any questions regarding the topic, we can collect them through the chat and discuss them later in Q&A session. So over to you, Sudeep Tai.
Okay. Thank you, Spandan. Let me just share my screen.
Hello.
Hello, Nikita. I'm so sorry to call you this late, but we have a situation. हाम्रो प्रोडक्सनमा इस्यु आएछ नि, लगइन नै गर्न सकेन अरे, बर्बाद जुलका।
रातिको 1 बजिसकेछ। Sure, Dai, I will look into it and respond to you accordingly.
Okay, thank you, Nikita. Thanks for the support.
Okay, bye-bye.
I believe most of us have been in similar situations, who are in support roles have been in similar situations before. This story resembles a typical support engineer when we have any issues in production. But what if this same story repeats every other day? What would be the life of a support engineer? Good evening, ladies and gents. Today, Nikita and I are here to present a topic related to production support and Opsgenie. We'll be talking briefly about production support, who an on-call engineer is, what are his or her primary responsibilities, and SLAs. We'll also try to cover in-depth regarding Opsgenie. That's an incident management tool that we use mostly at Audio, and also touch base on post-mortem reports. Production support. What is production support? By definition, production support is the practices and disciplines of supporting applications used by end users. So normally, in product development, in product development, we usually talk about feature development, enhancements, and improvements. However, we barely talk about production support until unless we have switched to production, right? The Agile framework has, so one of the frameworks that we use most commonly at Leapfrog is Scrum framework. In Scrum framework, the Scrum frameworks have a very well structured, well-defined roles, Scrum ceremonies, and various artifacts. But once we switch to production, it's another side of the world. So that's when the issues come in ad hoc. That's when after we switch to production, that's when we start getting ad hoc requests, feature requests, or could be production bugs and those kind of things. So it's the responsibility for the production support team to ensure of the uptime. They'll also need to ensure the system and applications are running smoothly by identifying any problems and deploying smart solutions. We'll also need to maintain and make sure of the product quality. So imagine it's like building a car, right? So we are adding, the product development teams would be adding features in the car, and to keep the engines running is the responsibility of the product and support. So who is an on-call engineer? So basically, an on-call engineer is a support engineer or an incident response team who primarily take the ownership of any production incidents. They are responsible for monitoring production servers, making sure the scheduled jobs have been run properly, and also managing the incidents. So the primary responsibility of an on-call engineer would be to acknowledge. The first step is to acknowledge any production bugs or issues, right? And then will also be responsible for resolving that. However, it's not necessary like the production support engineers would be responsible to resolve all sort of issues. They can also escalate production issues to respective teams. For example, if there is any new feature request from our real customers, real users, then that would be needed to be escalated to respective product team or Scrum teams. So basically, an on-call engineer would be accountable throughout the entire incident lifecycle. Incident lifecycle, as in from when an incident occurs to acknowledging any incident, resolving or escalating the incident, and creating post-mortem reports. Now let's talk briefly about SLA. So this kind of SLA could depend on projects, like based on projects. So this is a reference that we have taken from the project. So basically, the first and foremost, we need to define our priority levels. What's a P1? What's a P2? P3 and P4. P1 are basically critical issues. For example, if our web application is down, or if a user is not able, if our customers are not able to log into the application, which means it's an hard outage, like people are not able to use the application entirely. So such kinds of issues could be coined as P1. For example, in our case, if there is a hard outage for an entire client or facility, it's a P1. And it's for multiple clients as well, it could be a P2. Also, if there is any outage on some of the major functionalities of the application, the core functionalities that people use, that our customers use, if there is an outage, if that's for an entire client, it could be a P2. By client, for our case, it's hospitals, right? Hospitals based out of the US. So that could be a P2. But then if it's only for multiple users, have been affected, and not an entire client, that could be a third priority, P3 priority. Similarly, for minor functionality outage, it could be a P3 or P4. And for cosmetic changes, it's mostly, so cosmetic changes, mainly like design changes, those kind of stuff could be a cosmetic changes. And that would be, such kind of defects could be termed as P4 priority or P3 in case of multiple clients. So this is a typical example of service level agreement that we have. And it could also, as I said earlier, mentioned earlier, it could differ based on projects. Now, after we have defined the SLA, response matrix is also very important, right? What if for P1? What's the resolution time? What's the time to acknowledge? So we have also defined some resolution time for it. For example, for the case of P1, that's a critical outage or hard outage, I would say. The acknowledgement time is 1 hour, and the resolution time could be 24 hours. So if any user is, for example, if any user is unable to log into an application, to our web application production site, then we'll need to acknowledge within an hour and then get it resolved within 24 hours. Also, we'll also need to notify the senior leadership team as soon as possible. And all P1s and P2s need to have an incident report, which is a mandatory for us. Also, we'll also need to report on total outage time and total impacted user. Similarly, for P2, the acknowledgement could be done in 12 hours or next working day, and resolution time could be within 4 business days. For P3, the acknowledgement time is 1 business day, and resolution time is 10 business days or next sprint release. P4, that can be based on priority, like that can be resolved in any one of the plant sprints. So this kind of response matrix, like I mentioned earlier, it could be different for different projects, depending on the nature of projects and clients and urgency. This could differ, however, more or less, I believe it's going to be similar for all of us. Now, let me briefly cover about Opsgenie. So previously at Claudio, like before using Opsgenie, we had on-call engineers with a physical device, and now we have started to use Opsgenie as a tool. Now, why Opsgenie? So Opsgenie, as you all know, it's one of the Atlassian products. So I'm sure most of us are very familiar with Jira. So even if you go into Leapfrog's Jira Atlassian account, you must have noticed Opsgenie in Atlassian as well. So which means we can use the same login credentials that we use to access Jira and Confluence. We can also access Opsgenie. So it's a product that's very familiar, known to us. So Opsgenie is a modern incident management and response solutions. So I'd like to quickly highlight on three major items here. So who should be alerted, when should be alerted, and how should they be alerted? So these are some of the things that Opsgenie helps us, right? So how the means could differ. Like this could be based on user preferences. For example, if someone prefers email notification, they can be alerted by email, or if there is a critical priority, if it's a critical priority alert, and then that can be managed, that can be routed, and can be managed by phone calls or SMS or mobile app. Additionally, Opsgenie also has more than 200 out of the box integrations. Some of the integrations we have used are Jira, Site 24/7, and API. There are a lot more, and it also has a very good integration to Slack. So the main objective of Opsgenie is to centralize alerts and incidents. So obviously our Slack's messages are usually cluttered for any production incidents. Like we have lots of Slack channels. So Opsgenie helps us in centralizing all of the alerts and incidents. It also reduces noise that's associated with multiple monitoring tools. We probably use many sorts of monitoring tools like Site 24/7. Also, we want to make sure, like on-call engineers do not receive non-relevant orders, because if there are lots of noises, then there is very high probability that important notifications might be missed by on-call engineers. So we want to make sure relevant alerts are alerted to relevant people. Opsgenie also helps us in notifying right people at the right time by the right time. People can collaborate and take rapid action, and also some of the useful features are like reporting and analyzing the activities in Opsgenie. Let me go back. I think, yeah. So before Opsgenie, sorry, I missed this part earlier. I think I skipped this slide. So before Opsgenie, like I mentioned earlier, at Claudio, we had a dedicated on-call device. So which is basically a dedicated on-call device is basically a mobile phone that people were carrying. And we were rotating that device with our on-call engineers. Right? We had a group of on-call engineers, and the device was being rotated amongst them. However, because of pandemic, I think pandemic also taught us the COVID pandemic also taught us a very good lesson, right? We are not able to rotate that device because it was with one of our support engineers, and throughout the pandemic, the phone device remained with it. So we had challenges to rotate the on-call device, and Opsgenie in a way helped us to resolve that issue. Also, previously the production box we usually identified first by our users. For example, if there was any production incident, our customers used to identify the issues first, and then they were reported to us. For example, so if one of our APIs is broken and our API is stuck, then we know about it only after the incident had occurred and the user had reported it. So Opsgenie also help us to avoid some of these kind of pain points. Also, the alerts were very much cluttered in Slack channels. everyone in the channel would be frequently distracted with lots of notifications. So we had a dedicated production support channel, and all of the members, like if there is any incident, all of the members would be notified and they would be distracted from that. It was also challenging to identify and manage noise generated from various alerts. And like I mentioned earlier, the risk of missing very important incidents was very high. So moving on to the alerts and incident, I'd like to invite Nikita to continue.
Thank you, SMS, for the wonderful presentation. Before I start, I would like to share my screen. Just a minute. So okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So we talked about what is production support and what are the role of on-call engineers and how Opsgenie has helped in a way in Laudio to give a better support to our clients. So let's dig a bit deeper on understanding Opsgenie alerts and incidents. So basically, alerts are any kinds of thing that you like to notice or monitor when something goes wrong in your service or application. For example, you want to get alert if your website certificate, SSL certificate gets down or expired. Or for example, if you want to get an alert if your ETL pipeline is not running at some point of time, or you want to get an alert if your servers are taking too long time to respond, or the memory resources are consuming too long. So such type of alerts are related to the Opsgenie alerts. Now, how Opsgenie incident is different from alert is like you might want to be notified or alerted about something critical or going anomaly in your application or service, but at the same time you would also want to separate what are the most critical thing that you should take action immediately. So those things are incidents. For example, you get an alert that your login API is not working or is completely down. So that is something that you need to look immediately and resolve it immediately as soon as possible. So those alerts are treated as incident in Opsgenie. Okay. So moving forward, yeah, this is how the Opsgenie alerts look like. So we have, based on our SLAs or and types of agreement, we have different severity level. In Opsgenie, we have P1, P2, and P3, and P4. So P1 is a very crucial alerts that you need to look after immediately and know what are the main reasons for those alerts, right? So every alert will have a title, like for example, our login API failed, something title like that, and you can assign different types of tags to that alerts. For example, are those alerts coming from production environment or staging environment or dev environment? It's completely up to you to customize it according to that. And so you can also define, is it a REST API or is it a cloud resources or any your in-house servers, such thing like that. And you can also send a description of those alerts, like for example, if login failed, then why it failed, what was the reason, if there is any, you can put in there. And the alert, whenever we receive an alert, we can also add notes in that specific alert. For example, whenever you receive alert, you'll see what happened and you will write it down, and you will also write it down that how you will resolve this alert, and if it is resolved, then you will update the status according to it. So you can acknowledge alert and update the status accordingly, and finally when the issue is resolved, you close it, right? So the next thing is incident. Incident is the same as alert. It also has the priority from P1 to P4. The subtle difference between the incident and alert is like if there is you can report any incident or alert as an incident. Okay, you get an alert, you check it, you think that it should be an incident, you can convert them to an incident, right? So once you convert it to an incident, then what you can do is it allows you to create a Slack channel automatically. If you can see this in the screen also, there is a small section called create Slack channel. So by those incident, you can create a Slack channel and add only those respective individuals who needs to be aware of that specific incident, So this allows to prevent the noise that SMS was talking about previously. And the another thing is like, it's not essential that every incident require a postmortem report. So postmortem report is something that we have to generate whenever we face a severe outage, or for example, in our case, it's P1 and P2, right? So we can generate postmortem report automatically here. So that's one advantage of using Opsgenie. We don't have to write separate, compile it separately, and then post it somewhere. So it's available in the meantime. So what is a postmortem? If you ask, then it's just an incident report template, and which you can use to report about an incident. For example, if something, so for example, a user is not able to log in, or an entire client is not able to log in, that's your issue, right? So you write the title and you write when this incident occurred, who reported it, like what should be its priority, which clients got impacted or which users got impacted, how many users, what was the outage time, how long it took to resolve that issues, right? And what was the incident actually about, like what happened, what went wrong, and what immediate actions you took to resolve that, and what were the corrective action that you took for long-term fix. And also you can write about like some process improvements. For example, let's say your client were not able to log in, means that's something you could have detected earlier, right? Maybe if you had monitoring things, then you could have known, okay, our login services is not working as expected, then such things could be prevented, so you write those things in corrective action. So it's just a template on how we report an incident to our customer success or any leadership positions people. And the important thing to keep in mind is these reports should not be so technical and also so not non-technical. So you should be aware that it should be somewhere in between that, so that the non-technical person, whenever sees the report, is actually digest it. That's the another important thing to consider. So SMS also mentioned that we could integrate several third-party tools to send an alert to Opsgenie, right? So in Logio, we have integrated like 4 different integrations. One is Jira. So what we are doing via Jira is we have a production support board where our client creates ticket whenever there is an issue in production, our actual production application, So whenever there is an issue, when a ticket is created in Jira, it automatically sends alerts to Opsgenie, and the respective the respective support engineers will be notified about that incident or alert, And the next integration that we are using is Site 24/7. So to briefly talk about what Site 24/7 is, it's a monitoring tool that we can use to monitor different artifacts our services or application. For example, we want to monitor different metrics of our web application performance, for example, SSL certifications or its APIs, or any cloud services that we are using to host the application. So with these things are monitored via Site 24/7. And if Site 24/7 sees some kind of anomaly in those services, then it creates a lot, and those alerts are again escalated back to Opsgenie, so that our on-call engineers or support engineers can see at the same time. And the another integration that we have done is, for example, let's say it's not always quite possible to integrate third-party tool with Opsgenie directly. Sometimes you want to know some part of your code is not working or not working as expected, then you want to throw an alert to that system. So for that, we also have a facility or features to integrate Opsgenie APIs in our code itself. So it's there is an API endpoint that allows to create alert incidents or make a call. So there are different facilities. So these three are the important integration. The another integration is Slack. So you can also, as you saw from the previous slide, that whenever there is an incident, you can automatically create a Slack channel. So that's the integration that you could do in Opsgenie. Okay. So there is another feature in Opsgenie that allows you to configure users in different level and as well as teams in different level. So in a production support team, so there are always hierarchy, like who is responsible for what and who should be given what authorization and access. So there are three different roles that you can create in Opsgenie. One is the admin. So admin has access to all the features in Opsgenie, be it you want to create a new integration or you want to add new user, you want to delete the users from the existing Opsgenie account. And there is another user that is normal user. So the normal user is someone who can manage his or her profile in Opsgenie. And the other thing is also you can see the alerts, take action in those alerts, but he or she is not allowed to add integrations and edit the existing integrations. The another role that you can do is you can create your custom roles. For example, you'd like your normal user to see the alert, act in it, also adds few integration by himself or herself. So if you have such requirement, you can add custom roles and add users to that roles. The another important thing is team. So in a support group, we have a team of people, so there will be, for example, in case of Laudio, there is a platform support team. So we are a bunch of 6 people who will be looking after the things in production. If anything breaks down, will make sure that it is recovered in time. So at the another groups is engineering leads. Leads are from like there might be a production support lead person, or the lead from CSM clients, or even the lead from PMs, right? So all those leaders portions are there. So based on that, you can assign the team members accordingly based on your team's requirement. So we saw that we could configure our own team as well as own users, right? So SMS also talked about on-call engineers. So what is an on-call engineer? An on-call engineer is the immediate person who is responsible to take the necessary action for any sort of issues that happens in production. So Opsgenie allows you to sort of automatically schedule the rotation of on-call engineers, because it becomes tiring and too boring for a single person to remain on call for 24 hours all the day. So what we are doing in Laudio is we rotate the on-call schedules among the 6 people that we are in a team bi-weekly. So if, for example, for 2 weeks I was an on-call engineer, then after 2 weeks there will be someone else who will be taking my role. And you can schedule that automatically in here. So for currently we have like primaries and secondaries. So primaries are the one who will be responsible for the immediate action. If he or she is not available at the moment, then secondary portion will be taking over the responsibility of the primary. I hope this is clear. You can also create your own custom schedule according to your requirements. This was our requirement, so that is how we created it, but it depends upon the use case. The another thing is, like, for example, we know now we have a team of people. We know that we have scheduled on-call engineers. Now there is an important thing to discuss. Like, for example, if an on-call engineer is not available at the moment when incident occur, then what? How to handle such escalation? So these escalation policies can be, defined in the Opsgenie itself. So when it's similar, like for example, let's say the internet of our home goes down, we call immediately to our ISP provider, and if if the first phone number doesn't work, we call into the second and then third, until and unless we get some response, right? So it's the same case. If some incident occurs and the on-call engineer will not receive the call or will not take any action, then within 20 minutes it will be escalated to the next on-call engineer. If he or she fails to acknowledge it by 30 minutes, then it will be delivered to someone, him or her. For in our case, our team lead is Sagun Sapkota, so she will be the one doing that. And so you can configure it accordingly in your use case. Um, so once you have your escalation policy, once you have scheduled your on-call engineers, then once you have formed your teams, then what you can do is like, you would also want to customize how to route all the alerts that are coming in Opsgenie, because it might be you will be receiving alerts of different priorities from different sources, and you would not want only the same person or the same group of people to respond it if there is a larger team or large project itself. So what you can do is that you can define some routing rules based on the requirement. For example, in our case, what we have done is like, if some alert of P1 occurs, then it route those alerts to critical escalation policy. So if P1 is directed to critical alert escalation policy, then it also follows critical alert escalation policy defined in that time. And for any sort of alert except P1, it follows the normal weekday escalation policy. So that's how you can define different routing tools based on the requirement. So how you want those alerts to be acknowledged and processed and escalated. So this is all. And the next thing is, the next important thing is the notifications part. So it is completely for the sake of user or for someone who is actually using the Opsgenie. For example, you have a, you know freedom to choose how you would like to receive alert, whether it's an email or through an SMS or through a call. And you also can set some notification rule. For example, I only want to get alert having P1 priority. If that's my requirement, then I'll set it accordingly. So it's all based on the use case. I think that's all from my side. Thank you. So SMS, you can take over.
All right. Thank you so much.
Let me quit sharing my screen.
So do we have any questions from the?
I have something.
Okay,
So, all right. So we are almost on around the end of the session for today. But if you have any queries or questions first, then please drop your queries in chat. We'll try to respond them back at the end in our Q&A sessions. So before continuing ahead, like Nikita pointed out earlier, so three important things I'd like to re-highlight again. Who should be alerted? When should they be alerted? And how should they be alerted? Right. So I think these are some of the key things we need to consider, and Opsgenie definitely helps us improve our incident management lifecycle. In addition to what Nikita highlighted on, there are few analytics feature that's inbuilt into Opsgenie as well, and it'll also help us analyze how our support has been functioning. For example, if you see here, this is a chart that shows a daily mean time to acknowledge. So basically, there are various colors highlighted here. The red one signifies a P1 priority. and we have P2 and P3 priorities. So based on priorities, what is the mean time to acknowledge, right? So the time frame is missing I'm sorry, the timeline is missing here. Let's assume the second bar here on the left is March 22nd. So on March 22nd, the average mean time to acknowledge issue was almost around 9 hours 36 minutes for P1 priority. Similarly, the chart on the right shows mean time taken to resolve, like what's the mean time that has been taken to resolve any particular issue. So these are some of the various charts, analytics chart that Opsgenie provides us, and it's very helpful for us to analyze from this data as well. Secondly, we can also see the chart that's related to created versus closed alerts. Like, so how many of the alerts have been created and how many of them have been resolved. So we can easily visualize such data from Opsgenie as well. And finally, we can also have daily created alerts for status. So based on statuses, like how many have been acknowledged and how many have been closed. For example, if you see on March 22nd, we have less than 5, like one alert has been acknowledged, and between 5 and 10 alerts have been closed on March 22nd. Similarly, the graphs, the visualization on the right shows the daily alerts that have been created based on priorities. So priorities, as I mentioned earlier, are P1, first are P1, P2, P3, and P4. So P1 are like critical priorities are P1, P2 are high priority items, P3 moderate, and P4 are low priority items. So if you see here, on March 22nd, we had more than one P1 critical alerts, that's P1 priority alerts. So Opsgenie, in addition to all of the integrations and facility integrations and all of the functionalities that Opsgenie provides, as Nikita mentioned earlier, also provides good visualization charts that can be helpful for us to analyze how our production support activities. So I think this brings us to the end of the sessions, and we are up for the Q&A sessions. So if you have any queries for us, please let us know.
So meanwhile, I have one question. So the question would be to Nikita or SMS, anyone who would be willing to answer. So earlier we saw a demo of how, like, at 1 o'clock we used to get a call and we used to get the report, like incident report, and so we will be like looking into the issue and we will be acknowledging or resolving them. So with now Opsgenie implemented, how does that process look like when the issue arises at like 1 o'clock midnight? So how support engineers resolve those kind of issues?
Okay, I think I can take on this one. Maybe Nikita can add in. Feel free to chime in between. So basically, I think so. If there is an issue in P1, so first of all, like we mentioned, like we showed in our presentation, first of all, we have defined dedicated on-call engineers, right? We have prepared a schedule for them. Right now, we have a team of 6 members, and we have on-call. We have like a primary engineer and a supporting. So first thing, so based on the on-call schedules, if there is any P1 at midnight or at any moment in time, like first of all, the on-call engineers would be notified, right? So they'll be notified via Opsgenie. So Opsgenie will provide them like, so we'll call them in their mobile devices, right? In their personal devices, they'll receive a call. And the first thing they'll need to do is like to try to understand the issue, right? So first thing is like, what's the priority of that issue? Is that a P1? Is that a P2? So this would then come down, drill down to our SLAs that we have defined earlier. So based on the SLAs, like if it's a hard outage, if the user is unable to log in, or if our entire application, web application is down, then we should prioritize them as P1s. If there is, if it's a minor functionality outage, then it could be a P3 or a P4 as well. So, so the on-call engineers will need to identify that and then acknowledge that issue. Right? So if it's a P1, P2, and based on the SLA, like if it's a P1, we'll need to act immediately. We'll need to, the on-call engineer will need to try to resolve them as soon as possible. Right? And even before that, like let's assume, like as you mentioned, like we are receiving a call at 1 a.m. Now we have the on-call escalation policy that was presented by Nikita earlier. So the primary responsibility for the call will go to the primary on-call engineer. If they do not acknowledge with them the call within 20 minutes, it will be escalated to the next one, all right? Secondary person. If the secondary person is also not available, then it will be escalated to our lead. For example, Sagun is our production support lead. If she doesn't also acknowledge within a time frame, then it will probably be escalated. So that's the escalation policy that we have defined. Right? And now once the on-call engineer responds acknowledges to that issue, he or she is the responsibility of that user to resolve that issue if it's a P1. If it's a P2 or P3, that can wait, right? We can respond back saying, okay, like this is a P2 priority, it's not so urgent, we can come back to that later, right? If it's a P3, if it's a feature request, it's not a production bug. If it's a feature request, then we'll probably plan that in our planned sprints and prioritize in our sprints and then get it resolved and address in the sprint release cycle. So I think these are a couple of things like that we'll need to understand that they are called couple of, this is the incident management cycle that we follow. And based on this, we can resolve that issue. And also at the end of the day, like Nikita mentioned earlier, like postmortem reports are equally important. So postmortem report will help us to retrospect the issue, like what went wrong, how it occurred how many users were impacted, what was the total outage time, those kind of stuff are there. And also identify process improvement, some of the process improvement stuffs, which will help us to not repeat those issues. So I think that's the process that we do.
Thank you, Shrestha, for explaining all to me. I guess we have another question from Subhash.
Yes, so Subhas has mentioned, like, is it a paid or free service? Yeah, I don't think we have any free launches in this world. So obviously it's a free service. But it's a bit different. Like when we talk about Jira, we try to add in integrations like Jira integrations. But then, like for other integrations, it's depends on like all of the users. Right? It will be based on per user basis. For example, if we want to add in any plugin Jira, and if we have like 300 users at Leapfrog, then it will be like 300 times the cost. However, in Opsgenie, as Nikita mentioned, or in the team configuration section, we can only add in relevant persons, right? For example, if we have a group of 8 to 10 people in the production support role, we can just provide access to 8 to 10 people in Opsgenie. Right? They'll be able to access Opsgenie. And talking about costing, I think they have 3 different plans: the nominal plan, the standard, and the enterprise version. Standard, I think it's around like $20 per user per month, so it's not that cheap, I would say. But then as long as it can help us make our life easier, I think it's fine.
To add on to what those SMS is, I think they also provide a free plan just for 5 users to try out your things. Like if you need the Opsgenie for just a normal alert system and limited alerts are sufficient for you, then you can also use the free plan that is available.
Yeah, I actually asked the question and visited the website. So sorry about that.
Oh, you're so smart, Subhas.
So because of Subhash, we all got to know the answer. So you don't have to be sorry, right? So if there's no one asking question, then I have another question, right? So this is like a hypothetical question. So what's a sign for any project to like you start using Opsgenie? Is it after the project goes live into production, or the like production support team is built, or like production support team is really burnt out? Like when's the like process to be integrated into Opsgenie? When's the time?
I think that's a really nice question, by the way. Obviously, so I do not have a well-defined structure answer for that. Obviously, it has to be like product needs to go into production, right? So if the web application is still in product development phase, then I don't think it's any point adding Opsgenie. Only once we have added, um, once we have switched to live, or once we have switched to production, like it's a good point to add Opsgenie actually. And I believe it's personal preferences and practices as well. How structured you want to be. Like normally, as I mentioned earlier, uh, there is no well-defined structure for production supporting Agile, right? Agile basically talks about like it has very well-defined roles. If we follow Scrum framework, it has very well-defined roles, ceremonies, and artifacts. Like those are very well managed. But once you start switching over to production, then things start to change, right? We may have a stable velocity. We may have achieved a stable velocity during the product development phase. But then once we switch into production, then we will start getting many ad hoc. We could start getting many ad hoc requests like that's. But then it's also a very good. It's a big milestone for us. Like switching from development phase to production. It's indeed our biggest milestone. Actually, and that's when we start receiving the actual feedbacks, responses from our users, from real world feedbacks from our customers. And those could be not just that those could not only be bugs, there could be like production feature requests, could be enhancement, or could be any sort of improvements, and those kind of stuff are going to be there. So I think right before we start, I think it's a very good practice. I would say, like personally, it's a very good practice to define our SLAs, right? So to make sure we are on the same page with our customers or clients, we are setting the right expectations to our clients. The first step would be to define the SLAs. Like define our priorities. What are P1s, what are P2s, and what are P3 and P4. We can initially start with that, and slowly we can also start integrating Opsgenie. For example, if we talk about Claudio, like we are not using Opsgenie. We started from this year. We started using Opsgenie. So previously, but then like we had our SLAs defined. The response metrics was predefined. That help us to manage the incidents in a more that help us in managing the incidents. So it's Opsgenie, I would say, is an additional support that could help us make our lives easier.
Thank you, Ms. for answering my question. So with that, if anyone has the question, you can unmute yourself and ask them. So we will wait around 30 to 40 seconds. And if there are not any, then we will wrap up the session. Personally, I learned a lot because I've also been in the project same as SMS and Nikita since few months, and production support is a great team in our project, and learning about how they operate in a very proper manner is very nice. And I hope it would be a good reference to everyone of us in Leapfrog for other projects. And if we have any confusions regarding production support or Opsgenie, we can ask SMS and Nikita or any people from production support in person as well. So with that, I'd like to thank SMS and Nikita for coming up to Leaptalk and sharing your knowledge about Opsgenie and production support. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Spandan, and thank you to the organizing committee, Leaptalk's organizing committee. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to come here and speak to you. And your question now was I have a perception, okay? कि त सबै बुझ्यो भने क्वेसन आउँदैन रे कि त केही पनि बुझेन भने चाहिँ क्वेसन आउँदैन रे सो आई थिंक यू क्यान जज योरसेल्फ वेयर यू फिट इन्टु
Okay. So with that, I'll be stop recording.